A lot of people have been asking me, what the hell is going on with Iran right now? So I'm going to try to give you a short version that will hopefully explain it. It starts in May of 2018 when Donald Trump pulled out of the Iran deal. That was the deal we cut with them in the international community to limit their ability to create a nuclear weapon. This month, the Iranians finally decided, you know what? If the Americans are going to pull out of this deal, we're going to start enriching uranium again, and we're going to do all the things we weren't supposed to do as a part of this deal. Fast forward even further, the Iranians shot down an American drone flying over the Strait of Hormuz. Last night, the New York Times reported that Donald Trump was 10 minutes away from launching a military strike on Iran, but then at the last minute asked his generals or somebody, how many people is this going to kill? Because that's a thing you ask at the very end of a decision-making process, and it was too many for him to manage. So where does that leave us now? Honestly, we don't know. Clearly, some of his advisors want him to launch a military strike against Iran. Clearly, Donald Trump himself is pretty worried about the possible ramifications, but we're going to figure it out over time. And here's some more questions you guys send in trying to unpack this thing. Yeah, this is crazy. I mean, the Obama administration had negotiated a diplomatic solution with Iran to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon. We pulled out of that deal unilaterally. We left our European allies and friends holding the bag and started this campaign of trying to crush Iran's economy. Now they have responded in ways that are completely unacceptable. Clearly, they shot down our drone in the region, and that's unacceptable, and there should be consequences. But to leap to a place where we are going to take a military strike that reportedly, according to Trump himself, would have killed 150 Iranian service members is a massive escalation. And it is leaping us into a war with no diplomatic support, no international support. None of our friends and allies would be with us on this front to respond to the shooting down of an unarmed aircraft. No American service members have died. It's fucking crazy because what could happen next could kill a lot of people, both in Iran, could kill U.S. soldiers and airmen and Marines. And we should think long and hard before we do anything that could lead to that outcome. So there is no good argument for why we would start a war with Iran right now. It does seem like Trump is one of the voices of reason. It sounds like John Bolton, his national security advisor, is very much in favor of some sort of strike. It sounds like Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, the guy who you'd normally want pushing for diplomacy, is also in favor of a strike. The Pentagon, the folks in uniform, the Joint Chiefs, they are reportedly cautioning against a strike. We don't really have a Secretary of Defense because one of them just washed out because he had a bunch of fucked up vetting issues and family troubles and allegations of potential domestic abuse or alleged domestic abuse in his family. I don't know anything about it, but it's a pretty big deal that we don't really have a Secretary of Defense at a time when we might be bombing Iran. But the folks in the military are urging caution because they understand that this wouldn't be a simple thing, that it could very quickly escalate, and that we could be in a full-fledged war before we know it. So the scary thing about Iran is they have a lot of ways they could respond. They support Hezbollah, a terrorist group that has tens of thousands of rockets pointed at Israel at any given moment, and they can use them as a proxy force to attack us, to attack the Israelis, to attack other allies of ours. The Iranians have been proficient at striking the U.S. mostly through proxies forces in Iraq or in Afghanistan. They have proxy forces in Yemen. So there's a whole bunch of ways the Iranians could respond to us in the region that, would not necessarily be their military directly, but it could be through forces that are incredibly well-armed and well-trained. It could be devastating. Now, there's another scenario where they could actually start launching missiles of their own, the Iranian military, or they could engage our fighter jets. Like, there's a million ways this could go very bad. And the disconcerting part of the Trump administration approach and strategy so far is they've set out a policy path where you can see many, many ways for it to escalate. But they haven't set up the structures they need to have dialogue, to give everyone an off-ramp, and to calm tensions, and to try to negotiate some sort of solution. And that's what we need to get done immediately. Well, John Bolton has written previously that he wants regime change in Iran. He is using sanctions to crush their economy in the hopes that that will lead people in the country to try to overthrow the current leadership. And he believes that the only way to stop Iran's nuclear program is to bomb them to oblivion. So I think the only honest answer to your question is they don't have a strategy. They're looking to start a conflict, and they want regime change. The argument against the Iran deal that you sometimes hear is that it was time limited. So certain limits were negotiated over a decade or 15 years on Iran's nuclear program, and critics said after that time they had the green light to go get a bomb. Now, what I think that ignores is the fact that if you've negotiated a deal over 10 years or 15 years, and you get to year 8 of that deal, you start negotiating a follow-on agreement. And if you can't come to terms on that kind of agreement before the first deal concludes, then you start thinking about what steps you might take to pressure Iran to negotiate another deal. And you start the process over again with sanctions and all the UN Security Council resolutions and all the diplomatic tools we used the first time around. But pulling out of it did nothing to make us safer. We put our allies in a terrible position. The Europeans have been trying to save the Iran deal since we pulled out of it. And we also tell the world that America doesn't live up to its word in negotiations. And that's a terrible thing. I think the thing that's important for people to know is that while Trump didn't authorize this strike last night, that doesn't mean he couldn't do it tomorrow or the next day or the day after that. And so we need to stay vigilant. We need to make clear to the White House that he has no legal authorization to go to war with Iran. We need to make it clear to members of Congress that that's not the outcome we want. And what Trump and his team should be doing is they should go to the UN Security Council and our friends in the region and all of our allies and try to build a coalition to pressure Iran diplomatically to climb down from this position. So I think the key thing for people at home listening, call your member of Congress, all your elected officials, and let them know that you oppose a war with Iran, that President Trump doesn't have the legal authorization to go to war, and that we won't accept it if he does.